back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Amanda Ray. When I was 17, almost 18 years old, I left the cult that I was born in. I have more videos that go into depth about what it was like to be in a cult, what it was like to escape the cult. If you are interested in any of those videos, I'll leave them linked in my description box down below. This video is going to be a little bit more serious than my others. For those of you who don't know who I am Amanda Ray Grant. I was born into this cult known as the Order. We called ourselves the Order. It's also known as the Kingston Clan or the Davis County Co-op or the LDCC, which is Latter-day Church of Christ. There's a lot of different terms for it, but while I was in the cult, it was known as the Order. I just felt very motivated to make this video because of some things that have happened in my personal life, and maybe I'll tell a little bit about it. I actually, just before this video, I was trying to do my makeup and get ready for this video, but I could not stop crying because I just have been going through a lot lately. Maybe I'll just share a little bit about what's going on in my life because I feel like I'm pretty open with you guys, and you guys have been very supportive and positive to me. So recently I got the news that two of my full brothers are engaged to be married, and one of them just got married, and I was not invited to the wedding. My brother went even as far as to call and let us know that he only considers his Order family as family and not us outside family members. And I was even told that if I tried to show up, I probably would get escorted off the property. So there's a lot more that had happened and more discussions. I didn't directly talk to them because I think I've told you guys in a previous video, I can't physically handle being rejected right now in my life. So it was really hard to hear and to know that he does not consider me family, even though I helped raise him. I remember holding him in my arms and helping him because this is the brother that had seizures, and I remember being home alone with my other siblings who are now on the outside, and he had a seizure, and we all were so worried that we were going to lose him. And now he's just it's so easy for him to just lose us. And just knowing that he's never really going to understand why I left. But he chooses to not associate with me and not have me even be defined as a family member in his eyes because I chose to leave something that was so oppressive. I just felt so helpless. The only thing I can really do is just share my side, and I felt really, I was trying to channel this negative energy into something positive, and so I decided I'm gonna make a video. I've been struggling with this for a week, and in the beginning when I first heard about the engagement, I thought that I thought it didn't affect me as much as it did, and it obviously is affecting me. Just all of it, knowing that I can't be a part of his life and that he doesn't want me to be a part of his life. But it's sometimes I think I'm being a baby, and then other times I think I'm not grieving enough. I don't know. So here's me trying to make something good out of the situation. I wanted to talk about the process of brainwashing and manipulation, how it happens to people who are born in the religion like myself and like my brother, and also how brainwashing and manipulation can happen to people who are born in normal lives on the outside and how they can be convinced to join something so oppressive. Before I get into the video, I just want to let you guys know that I'm not a psychologist, but I was born and raised in a cult, so a lot of these points that I'm making are based off of what I've witnessed 17 years of being in a cult. And I also have gone to some psychology classes, but most of the information is just from experience. So what I'm going to be discussing is the main points of these cult practices and even manipulators. Even if maybe you're in an abusive relationship or you want to know, there's so many types of abuse too, emotional, physical. There's more than just physical abuse. So I'm going to be going in depth about that for hopefully this video. My whole goal is that this video helps someone, whether you're someone who's watching this realizing that they are being brainwashed, or realizing that you are in a manipulative, emotionally abusive relationship. I hope that anyone who is going through anything like that, my heart is there for you because I've been through it all. So hopefully this video can help someone. I feel like a lot of people put cult members in this box, like they're like only weak-minded people can be manipulated, and cult members. Same with like people who get abused in their relationship. They kind of put them in this like lower category or lower status, that they just aren't as smart, or like why didn't they just get out, or why are they staying in this abusive relationship. Anyone who has a brain is susceptible to being brainwashed or manipulated or in an emotionally abusive relationship. I think that our brains just don't want to believe that it could happen to us, and so we look at these cult members and these abuse victims as like almost like less than us. So I'm hoping that this video can also help people to see that it is bigger than you think. I'm going to explain how it can happen to anyone and what I've come up with. I have like so many notes that I've been like writing down and putting together, and I've like sifted through and decided and came up with 4 main factors. These 4 main points that I've come up with are in every cult that I have witnessed and every abusive relationship that I've witnessed. Before I dive into these 4 main points, I'm going to tell you guys a story. This is a true story. There's a woman who was not born into the order, who ended up marrying her sister's husband and joining and staying in this oppressive, forceful relationship, and has a bunch of kids with her sister's husband now. And I've had a lot of people ask how that can happen. How does it happen that someone from a normal life There's a baby in the house right now. I really hope it's not as loud as I'm thinking it is. Anyway, so how could someone join something so oppressive when they came from something that was not like this? When they came from something that wasn't a cult, that wasn't forceful, what would draw them to something like this? So the first main point that every cult and abusive relationship has to start with is trust. This woman who married her sister's husband, she trusted her sister. Her sister was the one who told her that she needed to marry her husband. So she first trusted her sister that she would have her best intentions at heart. And for me, same thing, like I was born into the cult and I just trusted that my parents were not manipulating me, were not lying to me. So it all starts with trust. That's how we're able to get pulled into these situations. I feel like I had to take a break because I was getting a little worked up. I had to fix myself. Where was I? Okay, so we're going through the 4 main points that manipulators use and abusers and these cults use. The first point was trust. You have to obviously trust someone before you can get lured into a cult. You're trusting someone and letting that guard down, and then they can in turn manipulate you. So how do we stop this? Just don't trust anyone. So first is trust. The second point I wanted to discuss is fear, which every cult that I've ever seen uses fear as like one of the main staples. Also every abusive relationship. And I wanted to dive deeper into the definition of fear and why it's not a good thing to ever make a decision based on fear. Fear or acting in response to fear oftentimes can make us act unethical and cause us to make rash decisions because of the intense emotion that fear can bring us, which is why a lot of cults get such a success rate with followers, because they instill fear into their followers. So it's so deeply ingrained. And for me, growing up in the cult, I was in fear like most of my life. I was so afraid of being damned to hell. If I questioned the leadership or if I went against any of the rules, I was so afraid that I wasn't going to make it into heaven, because they hold that salvation. That's what most cults do. Or they'll take things away from you or do certain things that cause you to suffer. So fear is a big control tactic that cults use. And just like the story that I said where this girl was manipulated into marrying her husband because she trusts her sister actually did tell her that she had a dream that she would die by a certain date if she didn't marry her husband. So there's trust and fear being used. So in turn, this woman marries the husband and then now is in this committed relationship and is still in fear for a lot of things, but now she's in this cult that is even ingraining and instilling fear more into her brain. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about fear being something that is all like kind of in the mind. Our mind is such a powerful thing, and I feel like our environment has a lot to do with whether our mind grows or stays stagnant. And the best I can like describe what I'm trying to describe, I guess, is I have an example of the Stanford experiment. The Stanford prison experiment. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it. Maybe I'll leave a link up to this information, but briefly I'll discuss what the Stanford prison experiment was. So this researcher hired some young college students, they were all men, and made sure that they had no criminal background and no like mental illnesses, and he flipped a coin. Heads, they were prisoners, and tails, they were prison guards. And then they had this like fake prison scenario, and the study was supposed to go on for 2 weeks, but it ended only 6 days in because prisoners were having mental breakdowns, and the whole like community and environment became so toxic to these people, and it became a very real situation for the prisoners, even though it was a fake experiment. So they had to shut the whole thing down 6 days in. And my point is by this is like being in fear. These prisoners actually were in fear, and it became a very real thing in their brain. Whether or not it was real in the world, it was real here, so then it's real to them, which I feel like a lot of cult members have that. Like, even though in the real world they're not going to like die if they don't marry the husband, or certain things aren't going to happen as punishment by God, like you're not going to get struck by lightning or anything, but in your mind, if you believe it and you're in fear, then it's real, it's true, if that makes sense. And a lot of it has to do with your environment. Fear also can cause us to kind of go into this state of survival mode. The prisoners in this experiment were all in survival mode, and honestly, like I feel like 99% of the cult members that I grew up with, even including myself while I was there, we were all in survival mode. So survival mode is like you're down here. You can't pass this with growth. People outside with like loving families and like supportive environments and like healthy relationships are able to like grow financially, spiritually, emotionally, and just keep going. There's no roof, there's no end. But because we are in survival mode and controlled by fear, there's this roof right here. We will never surpass it as long as we are controlled by fear. And what survival mode is you're not worried about your emotional health or yourself or who you are. All of that stuff is non-existent because you're so worried about surviving. You're so worried about getting into heaven, or so worried about your abuser, pleasing your abuser, so you can't ever think that far ahead. So does that make sense? Survival mode is where growth dies, and it's all based on fear. This brings me into my next part, isolation. So we have trust, fear, and then isolation. Isolation is a huge thing that abusers use to control their victims. So this woman who married her sister's husband and now is controlled by fear, they now isolate her by saying, you may no longer have connections to your outside family members. You should only be around God's people. So basically cutting off any outside influences that's going to have any type of negative opinions about the leadership in the cult. So they're cutting off anyone who's going to disagree. This same thing can happen if you're in an abusive relationship. The abuser will try to isolate you from anyone who is going to make you think for yourself, or think maybe that your abuser is not good for you. Then your abuser will probably say things like, well, I don't like you hanging out with them because I don't think that they're good for you, or just whatever. Anything that they can do to get you isolated from anyone who's going to disagree with the lifestyle that they want you to have. And that's isolation. So now that you have all this fear, you're in survival mode, and then you're isolated from the outside world. Same with for me. I was born into this cult, so I was already isolated. I didn't really have any relationships with anyone on the outside till I was a little bit older, but still, like, from a very young age, I believed in everything that they told me because I had no other, it wasn't like black and white. It was like, this was it. This was the only option I had because there was nothing else. So we have
Trust, fear, isolation. I watched a video and this psychologist went into depth saying that emotional abuse can actually be worse in some aspects than physical because the emotional effects in the brain are a lot harder to heal than physical abuse. You know, like a bruise can heal over a few weeks. How long does it take for emotional abuse to heal? Okay, so emotional abuse, we're going to talk about that, how you can tell someone is being emotionally abused. So the main points of an emotional abuser will use is they will degrade you, put you down. The effects of that is you are going to lose confidence in yourself. So, and they also will control you, belittle you, and treat you like a child or treat themselves as they are superior to you. For me, in the cult, I started to feel like I couldn't trust my own decisions or my decisions weren't good enough because these leaderships were acting like I could not have a relationship with God. If anything I believed in went against them, then I was dumb and they were smart, you know. Same with this woman who joins this cult and now is isolated, married to her sister's husband. She now is beneath the husband and he tells her what to do and tells her how to be because he's ultimately her key to heaven. They take the power away from the women in the order. Every woman in the order is being emotionally abused. I don't care who you are. They are in some form. I believe that an abuser or a cult leader can never put themselves in your shoes. All the abusers that I knew in the order, they just could not put themselves in the woman's shoes. And I talked about this in a video before where I confronted my dad and I said, well, how would you feel if you had to share your wife? And he laughed. Like, oh, that would never happen. But it's like, you're asking us to do that. You're asking every single woman to do that, and you're not willing to put yourselves in their shoes. Like, you literally just laugh at the thought of it. I believe abusers just have the hardest time, like, relating to their victims or understanding what they're actually putting their victims through. They also are never the ones with the issues. It's always the victim's fault, and this is, I'm going to use my dad as an example again. My dad would never take the blame for anything wrong that happened with his kids. He would always blame my mom, and then anything good that the kids would do, he would take credit for. That's a emotional abuser. They also will gaslight you a lot. If you don't know what gaslighting is, I'll put the definition of gaslighting. Neglect is a big part as well. Not even just like them not being there physically, but them not being there emotionally for you. That's neglect, and that's also a form of emotional abuse. All of these things will add up to codependence, and they make the choices for you. They make you feel like you cannot make decisions on your own. And then all of these things kind of make you lack your identity. You don't really have a personality because they now broke you down and rebuilt you into who they wanted you to be. So I used to have this joke that I would make in the order. It's not funny now, but back then I just would call the order members that were super righteous, I would call them robots because all of them were like the same personality. They all were exactly the same. They were just built to be that way. They didn't know anything else, and they were all in survival mode and controlled by fear, so they are all robots. To me, anyways, that's how they looked, and this is coming from someone who was born and raised into this cult. That's how they break you down and rebuild you. It's how a lot of them kind of become a little bit mindless. Like, I remember feeling like a zombie, just going through the motions so that I could get to the next day, and it was very miserable. I kind of want to talk a little bit, just touch briefly on Stockholm Syndrome. I'm sure a lot of you know what that is. People use Stockholm Syndrome to describe kidnapped victims who have fallen in love with their captors. And honestly, I feel like people think that it doesn't happen as often as it does. I believe Stockholm Syndrome happens way more than we think, which is why a lot of women stay in abusive relationships. Most all of the women in the order have Stockholm Syndrome for their husbands, for their abusers. They somehow get this bond with their abuser. And even the ones that are physically abused, they somehow feel they'd rather die without their abuser. And they don't look at them as an abuser. They put all these excuses in the way for why they did those things. It was really out of love and care and blah, blah, blah. But it's really, in my opinion, all these women are just having Stockholm Syndrome for their abusers. And this isn't just cult members. Now that I've seen so much of the 17 years that I was in the cult, and I still associate with some people in the cult, I can see a lot of those pieces from the cult actually happening out here in the real world. Maybe not to the extreme of like being in a community where it's all like meshed into one place. It's like I can pinpoint when people are in these types of situations without even knowing them for very long, which I guess is the positive thing from coming from a cult, right? The last point I'm going to bring up, it's in every single manipulative relationship and in every single cult, they use guilt. So guilt is a big thing that keeps the followers in the group. It kept me in there for a long time. They would guilt you into staying. You know, if you leave and you have children, what kind of life are these children going to have? Are you really going to take them out of God's kingdom and bring them to hell with you? I didn't have kids, so my guilt was, are you really going to leave your family behind and throw us in the trash like that? Even though I was going through so much, I wanted to stay because I didn't want my family to feel like I was abandoning them. And they did. They always throw it around on you, even though I'm not going to go into detail about all that, but guilt is a huge thing that these cults use. And they also are in just abusive relationships in general, making you feel guilty for not being good enough. This is how they control you. Fear, isolation, and guilt. And it all starts with trust. So how do we recognize these things? This is something that I feel like I had the quote in the beginning of the video, how it is easier to be fooled than to believe that you've been fooled, or to realize that you've been fooled. And I've believed that ever since I left the cult, because for me, even, it was really hard to realize that I had believed lies all my life and I had been lied to all my life. And I think that's why people say ignorance is bliss, because there are a lot of people who just have their blinders on in the order, and it's like so obvious that their life is a lie, but it's like they're 40, 50 years old now, and what are they going to do? Leave and tell everyone, okay, yeah, I made a mistake. It's hard for people. Pride is a big thing, and it's hard for them to admit to themselves that they were wrong. And for me, it was really hard too. I went through this huge phase where I just stopped trusting myself. I didn't know who I was. I feel like I still am going through the process of figuring out who I am, because the cult built me into this person, and then I left and tried to figure out who is Amanda now. But I think that the main things are, like, if you really want to make sure that you're living the life that you want and it's not affected by anyone else, I think you need to constantly be asking yourself what it is that you want. And I think this video, if you've noticed any of these things in your relationship, like the cycle of emotional abuse that I discussed, or maybe Stockholm syndrome, maybe you're making excuses for why this person is hurting you physically or mentally or emotionally, recognize that. I think that's the first step, is recognizing that there is something wrong. And I mean, we're all smart and you can tell if you really are happy or if you're not happy. You can tell if you really are yourself or if you're not. And it does take a long time to have a really good relationship with even yourself, because a lot of us, it's kind of sad, we spend 24/7 with ourselves, and a lot of us don't really know ourselves. So I think the biggest thing that you need to focus on to make sure that you never get in a situation that's a manipulative, abusive relationship, I think you just need to know yourself. A lot of people are so afraid to be alone, but I think being alone is a very vital part of getting to know yourself and trusting yourself and respecting yourself enough to not get in these types of situations. And people who are in these abusive relationships or in these brainwashing cults, they're not stupid. They're not less than. It's just, like I said, the cycle happens. It kind of can happen to anyone, and it really does start with trust. And I feel like if we all trusted ourselves and respected ourselves and knew ourselves before ever getting into any physical relationship with anyone, I know that's not like possible for everyone, but I think that the main thing is to know yourself and know your worth and know your respect and know that you are worth so much more. And just because someone doesn't think you are worth that extra effort or worth being loved and unconditionally loved, that doesn't mean that that's true. I think every person, and I know every person deserves to have unconditional love. And if you didn't have that as a child, that kind of trickles through your adult life. How I've helped myself through all of that, what my therapist has me do is basically giving I know this sounds dumb, but like giving my child self that unconditional love. And like, I'm loving myself unconditionally now, even though, like, despite the fact that my parents didn't think I was worthy of that love. So I could go on and on and on about all of this stuff, but my main goal today was to just bring all of this stuff to light. And hopefully a lot of you are not going through any of this stuff, but I do know that some of my viewers are or have gone through this stuff, and I hope that it's helped you in some way. That's the whole goal of this video, is just to help someone. because I feel like when I get in these depressive modes, it's kind of easy to spiral and then get more sad and more sad and more sad. But I feel like if I catch it quick and I channel it to something positive like this, then I feel better, and maybe I can help you guys feel better too. Maybe we can all heal together, and hopefully no one is staying at that survival mode ceiling. I feel like that's the scariest place to be, is because you can be stuck there forever. I know people who are still stuck here in survival mode that I knew back as a child. And I was stuck at that mode too. It's a scary place to be, and I just hope that this video enlightens anyone who is in that survival mode to kind of realize it, because that's the first step, is to realize it, and then what are you going to do about it, you know? But I hope this video helps someone. You're always welcome to leave comments in the comment box down below. I will be going live next week. So let me know in the comments too when you guys want me to go live. I want to be answering you guys' questions, and just, you know, I just feel like I've had a really good support system with you guys, and I really appreciate all of you guys. So I'm trying to just be around the positivity in my life. Sorry I didn't have my makeup and hair done in this video, but next one I promise I'll be more presentable. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.